Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It is the 13th of December, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can easily find that on the phone. Just give us a call at 1-800-472-0391. That is the Alaska Weather Information line. Most of you probably have that written down by your phone already. Weather.gov/Alaska is an easy way to find us online. A one-click will get you to your local National Weather Service office, whether Fairbanks, Juneau, or Anchorage serves your area. And soon, we'll be rolling out localized Facebook information for you. Right now, many of you are used to finding us on NWS Alaska. However, very soon, not yet, but soon, you'll be able to find your Anchorage area that serves South Central and Southwestern Alaska, your interior, North Slope, and West Coast information from National Weather Service office in Fairbanks, and Southeastern Alaska served by the Juneau Forecast Office, all on one Facebook page for each office there. So you can continue to view all of Alaska's information from NWS Alaska, but soon, if you'd like to just limit your focus to what's happening in Anchorage or the Valley, or perhaps in Fairbanks or Nome, or Utqiagvik or Juneau, Ketchikan, you can localize that information. And we'll explain how to do that as we go forward very soon. So watch for more information. In the meantime, if you have more questions about what you're finding from our services now, whether it's aviation related, tsunami weather related, or perhaps river forecast information related, let me know. David.Snider@noaa.gov is a very easy way to find me. Here's a look at our satellite picture now. And as we've been watching throughout the day, we were watching a lot of wind move through southeastern Alaska. That has subsided now. A very quick burst of wind has moved through. And as that continues to pull eastward, conditions will continue to improve. Now, as we notice out in the Gulf, we've got a very broad area of convective cloud cover across the north coast. This is all wrapping around low pressure as it moves to the east. Behind that, another wave of low pressure is working through, and that will continue to work its way eastward as we head toward the weekend. So a very, very active pattern as we go from today, tonight, into Saturday and eventually Sunday. And up north, low pressure is lined up across the west coast. And you can see one of these swirls just hovering very close to Nunivak Island and St. Paul. Another wave is sitting up across the Chukchi Sea. But all of this is diminishing in its intensity. And what that means, especially if you're in the Bering Strait and around St. Lawrence Island and our friends in Savunga, you'll notice that northerly wind is not nearly as strong as it was 24 hours ago, or 24 hours prior to that, in fact. And this trend should continue as we head through the weekend. So really good news if you're tired of the wind and the blowing snow. You'll probably still have some wind and you'll probably still have some snow, but the intensity of that is going to be greatly improved or diminished as we go into the rest of the weekend there. So continued improvement as we go. You can also notice a whole lot of bright white clouds here across the interior. As low pressure is pushing moisture into the region, it's also flowing over cold air, and there's a tremendous availability for snow production in this type of weather pattern. So generally light snow is falling across many parts of the interior in Alaska, and it has been over South Central. That trend is going to continue as we remain unsettled going into the weekend. So quite a bit going on. Active storm pattern just to our south and at times grazing and blowing through southeast. Winds diminishing across the west, and generally favorable winter conditions. If you're a fan of winter, then your heart is probably happy at this point if you're a true Alaskan. Now let's take a look at the interior, and you'll notice areas of light snow are found across the region. Many observation points are reporting that this afternoon, again across Wales, Tin City, out towards St. Lawrence Island. Southwest, we've got another low sitting here across Bristol Bay that I didn't really talk about much, all the way up and down the Alaska Peninsula Arm into Bristol Bay and Lake Iliamna. Light snow has been reported there. And here is our next weather maker. You can just barely see it on the map at 964 millibars. And our exiting weather maker moving away from southeast at 988 millibars. Had some thunder and lightning with this as well, as that upper level wave is working its way across. So this will certainly blow through the region, but quite a bit of that will be pulled back into the next weather system that is coming into the Alaska Peninsula and just south of the eastern chain at 954 millibars tonight. That's a strong storm. High pressure sitting across the Gulf. will remain around 1,008 millibars, giving us just a brief ridge of high pressure as we get into tomorrow. It looks like a lot of the precipitation chances that are possible in southeast will actually fall apart really quickly overnight and have a fairly decent day tomorrow, so watch for that. Low pressure sitting outside of Prince William Sound at 990 millibars will keep snow chances around the Kenai and around many parts of the Chugach and Prince William Sound. Up across the interior, the central and eastern interior especially will continue with light snow opportunities. Some of that very close to, if just not north of Fairbanks. From St. Matthew to Nunivak Island, a weak wave of low pressure there. Showers along the coast and the Capes and up around the Bering Strait. We're still looking at some light snow around St. Lawrence Island. For the north slope, a frontal boundary hovers very close to home for you, and that's going to keep the coldest air right across the north slope tonight and generally north of the Brooks Range and the passes. With low pressure coming into the eastern part of the Aleutians, we're going to start to see some stronger easterly winds wrapping around that low pressure system. That'll quickly move off to the east for Friday, and you'll get back in that stronger northerly flow, the strongest of which will be around the southwestern Capes. Through the Bering Strait, though, low pressure is continuing to diminish, so that strong and hefty north wind that you've had for most of the week should get better and better as you go through the daytime tomorrow. Around Prince William Sound, don't be surprised to run into rain mixed with snow. For most of the Cook Inlet region, a dying cold front that's just barely making its way to the Alaska Range will probably be enough to keep snow clouds in our region as we go through your Friday. But look at southeast. Breaks in the cloud cover as a high pressure ridge moves in. The trough of low pressure is moving out as it moves into British Columbia, and that should set the stage for generally favorable conditions to be outside, and maybe if you can find a snowy spot, get some sunshine on that snow for some really pretty pictures. Low pressure sitting across the Bering Strait will hover around 999 millibars. Areas of light northerly winds will move through, and not terribly light, but considering what you've been through for most of the week, it will feel like a nice breezy day, if that. Areas of fog and some light flurries are expected around Utqiagvik, out toward Wainwright and eastward toward Atkasuk and Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse, and then further south toward the Alaska or the Brooks Range passes there. And also watch for a wave of snow showers for the central and western chain. By Saturday, our main weather maker will be across the Gulf at 959 millibars. It is still a very potent storm, but notice how this front is separating away from the core of low pressure. This happens in occlusions, and as this wave moves out and away from the center, what we find in the middle won't be nearly as intense as what we find on the periphery of the storm. Notice the packing of these pressure gradient lines here. These are isobars, of course, and the tighter they are, the faster the wind blows. You've heard me say that a million times plus. Well, look how tight they are across southeast, anywhere from Chilkoot and White Pass all the way down towards Sitka, Ketchikan, Annette, Petersburg, Craig. It doesn't really matter where you are. Saturday's winds are going to come up across southeast, and I would be prepared for gales and storm force winds as we get into your Saturday, not to mention the chance for some rain and snow moving through your region as that colder air comes through. Across the core in the central and eastern Gulf, there will be periods of heavy rain and maybe even some thunder and lightning with that. But closer to the coast where we all live, the winds will be picking up and periods of squally type weather will be passing through as that front gets closer to home. And that could include Prince William Sound, Portage Valley, up through Cook Inlet, all the way down to Kodiak Island, Kenai, Homer, Seward, you got it. And then further up the road system, another weak push of colder air will also help to generate a better chance for some snow through the Parks Highway system, all the way up toward Denali and probably Healy and onward into Fairbanks, Eagle, and maybe as far south as Northway. So it will be unsettled as we go through the weekend, and for many along the coastal locations, there should be some wind. Out to the west, yet another system's already working its way into the North Pacific. So for those that have been wondering where winter is here, and winter is still pretty active as we go into late December at this point. Snow showers also continue through the Bering Strait and across the Chukchi coast, though low pressure will not be nearly as strong there. You'll notice the big chill with high pressure moving in off of eastern Asia at 1,014 millibars. So how cold will it be? Let's take a look at temperatures for tonight and tomorrow morning. 20s and 30s for southeast, south central, down in the teens. Above the 20-degree mark around Kodiak at 26, single-digit temps for most of Bristol Bay, including Dillingham, around 1 degree overnight. Bethel looking at 10 below, McGrath about 11 below, 4 below in Nome. Kotzebue temperatures close to 10 below, anywhere from 15 to 30 below across the North Slope. Prudhoe Bay and Nidhorst, some of the coldest temperatures there approaching that 30-degree mark below zero. Around 30 above for Adak and Atka. High temperatures there tomorrow should go above freezing. 28 in St. Paul, 17 for Nunivak Island and Macoriac. Looking at teens and low 20s for most of the Cook Inlet region. Homer could be 28, Kodiak 34. Mid to upper 30s for most of Southeast. Sitka, one of the warm spots at 37. Haines closer to 29 for the afternoon tomorrow. 5 above in Eagle. Look at 3 above for Fairbanks. Healy sitting at 0 tomorrow. 9 below in Fort Yukon, 12 below in Arctic Village, and 12 below as well for Anaktuvik Pass. Looking for temperatures from 5 to 15 below for daytime high temperatures for your Friday afternoon on the North Slope. Wainwright, 11 below. Saturday morning temperatures are cooling off quickly, especially for the northern half and southeast, back into the low to mid 20s. In fact, Haines and Skagway could be closer to 20 and lower 30s for most of southern southeast, and Sitka 30 degrees. Yakutat about 25. Prince William Sound anywhere from 17 around Whittier to 27 in Cordova. Low to mid teens for the Cook Inlet region, 11 in Talkeetna. Kodiak Island 32. 0 in Eagle, 5 below for Fairbanks, 17 below in Fort Yukon and Arctic Village, 23 below for Bettlesville. A big chill for you Saturday morning. Anywhere from 15 to 30 below again across the North Slope. You can see those deep purple colors there indicating that really cold stuff entrenched across the North Slope. Kotzebue Sound 10 to 15 below Saturday morning, 6 below in Nome, 4 above for Gamble, not bad at all, 9 above for Macoriac. And areas around Bristol Bay, anywhere from about 0, 1 below, in fact, the further west you go toward Dillingham, to 5 above for King Salmon, teens and 20s for the Alaska Peninsula. Sandpoint closer to 26, Dutch Harbor and Unalaska 28. Highs on Saturday in the mid-30s to mid-40s for Southeast, warming up sharply there. 20s and 30s for Prince William Sound, mid to upper 20s for the Cook Inlet region, 31 in Homer, 41 in Kodiak, 5 in Fairbanks. Looking at high temperatures now, anywhere from 15 to 25 below on the North Slope. Utqiagvik 8 below, Kaktovik 15 below, Prudhoe Bay and Nidhorst closer to 20 below, 6 below in Kotzebue Sound, Point Hope about 13 below, 2 above in Nome, 1 above for Shishmaref, and about 7 above for St. Lawrence Island. Bristol Bay temperatures back in the mid to upper teens and 30s for the Alaska Peninsula, with warmer weather moving eastward as we go to Sunday.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to your aviation weather now. With low pressure forming and strengthening in the Gulf, we're going to have a pretty strong southerly flow. That's going to put IFR conditions into Prince William Sound, Portage Valley probably, into areas close to Yakutat, and then south of that, look for VFR conditions across most of Southeast and a large part of the central and southern interior from the upper Tanana and the upper Yukon Valley, and then southward into southwestern Alaska and Bristol Bay. Look for VFR just south of the Pribilofs, but not quite over the islands. And northward, IFR conditions, thanks to a northerly wind, will continue around St. Lawrence Island and a large part of the Bering Strait, with just about everywhere else under MVFR conditions. We'll also see IFR banked up against the southern side of the eastern and central Aleutians there as we get into your Friday morning. A lot of that's going to shift eastward as we go through the weekend. Notice southeast still looks pretty good. VFR for Friday afternoon. IFR around some of the higher terrain east of Prince William Sound and into the Kenai Fjords area just outside of Hitchinbrook Entrance. And then wrapping around Kodiak Island. Shelikof Strait looks to be a mix of MVFR and VFR conditions, with most of the middle Tanana Valley, the upper Yukon, the middle Yukon, and southwestern Alaska holding on to VFR. So if you're in southwest, this is the time to fly, assuming turbulence isn't going to be a huge issue for you just yet. As we look out to the west in the Bering Strait, look for IFR conditions to continue there, and MVFR mainly for the Chukchi Coast, with the Beaufort Seacoast kind of popping into some VFR there for a little while on Friday afternoon. That trend should continue into Saturday morning, with general clearing taking shape across the western Brooks Range all the way down through the middle and lower Yukon Valley. Hit and miss MVFR across some of the higher terrain for southwest, but a large part of the region will be generally VFR flying. Look for the Susitna Valley all the way into the Tanana Valley northward and south into south central Kodiak Island to be widespread MVFR, and VFR conditions continue for southeast. You'll see more IFR developing across the Barren Islands and into the eastern side of the Kenai Peninsula. Most of the Gulf, southeast still looking pretty good. Most of the upper Tanana Valley and upper Yukon looking good, with some areas to the north and west up toward Bettles and south toward Tanana looking at marginal conditions. VFR across a large part of the western interior and coast, and then IFR lingering around St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait. Here's your pass conditions in for your Friday. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to see marginal conditions really all day long. As you get around to Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we're going to have a really early start with marginal conditions, but rapid improvement it looks like. Most of the day will be at VFR conditions, so watch for that to happen pretty quickly in the morning. Rainy Pass looking for VFR sailing there as we go through Friday. Windy Pass also looking at VFR to MVFR conditions as the day goes on. Isabel Pass marginal conditions most of your Friday. Mentasta Pass leaning over to marginal conditions as we go through the day. Tanita Pass looks like a marginal kind of day for your Friday, and Portage Pass IFR to start, but again, a quick improvement to marginal conditions, and that's mostly on the east side. The west side looks a lot better already. Chilkoot and White Pass looks like we'll probably move to VFR and then stay there for the bulk of the weekend, as you just saw. Freezing levels, really not much to write home about. Most of the state is sub-zero, or sub-freezing, I should say, with the level right around Sitka to about Ketchikan, Metlakatla, and Kodiak Island and most of the chain. Everything north of that, of course, is below freezing at the surface and aloft, and you're struggling to see the 2,000-foot line there, but it is over the Gulf at this point. Icing potential is limited. Most of the north is really dry and cold for that matter. We're not looking at a really large swath of moisture moving through there. So the greatest threat right now is across south central, southwest, and the southern Bering Sea, generally above 4,000 feet. You can see a little bit of icing moving out of the way through British Columbia and away from Alaska at this point, but generally isolated moderate should be expected around most of the Wrangell-St. Elias region into south central, the Susitna Valley, and out toward Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula at this point. Our jet stream still has our fast-moving river of air just blazing across the North Pacific at 160 to 185 knots. This is keeping that main storm path and a lot of the moisture out of reach for most of Alaska. But there is moisture to be used, and we're getting some of that energized by another northerly extent of the jet right across south central and southwestern Alaska leading into southeastern Alaska. That's helping to energize some areas of low pressure here and keep that snow falling across the region. Little disturbances one right after the other. As we go into Friday, pretty broad southerly flow is shaping up. Over the Gulf, look for winds at 40 to 60 knots, light northerlies across southeast and northerlies across the west coast, 15 to 20 knots across the north slope, 10 to 20 from the south. More of an easterly flow there on Friday. Look for low pressure out around Norton Sound, light winds coming through the Bering Strait and then picking up as they descend down the west coast. Northerlies for the central chain at 40 knots. Much stronger southerlies over the Gulf, 50 to 75 knots in some cases. So turbulence will be across south central below 4,000 feet, outside of Prince William Sound, over the Barren Islands and over the central and eastern chain to the Alaska Peninsula.
Sharing stars.
Greetings, stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dehne Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory. We're here to help you find your way around the sky tonight. We often talk about identifying stars by their constellation or star picture that they help to form.
For example, we would say Betelgeuse is in Orion or Zubin al-Janubi is a star in the constellation Libra. But for two stars visible tonight, well,
let's just say their relationship status is complicated.
First, we'll introduce you to the star Elnath, which connects a guy holding a goat to a charging bull.
Then we'll look high overhead for the star Alpheratz, which, depending on your imagination, could be the head of a beautiful princess or the backside of a flying horse.
Yikes, that is complicated and a little disturbing.
Exactly. Let's head to the sky. Okay. We have our sky set up for any night this week at 7 p.m. facing east. Sometimes it's hard to identify the pictures in the constellations, so let's look for two shapes in the stars.
About 1/3 of the way up and a little north of east, look for a squished pentagon shape of stars. That is the constellation Auriga the Charioteer. It may be tough to picture a guy rolling around the heavens carrying a baby goat in his arms, but that is exactly what the ancient Greeks saw up there.
Now, just above the eastern horizon, look for a V shape of 5 stars that can be extended over to the left to 2 other stars. This is the constellation of Taurus the Bull. It may not look exactly like a bull, but hey, it's better than Auriga over there.
But look, there's one star that seems to connect the two constellations. That is Elnath, and we better zoom in for a closer look.
Elnath is a blue-white star about 130 light years from Earth, and it's huge. It's about 5 times more massive and shines 700 times brighter than our sun. Can we show Elnath compared to the sun?
Wowzers. Now we have to figure out which constellation Elnath is in, Auriga or Taurus. The name actually is a clue, since Elnath comes from the Arabic meaning the budding.
Oh, watch your mouth.
No, Dean. I mean, the budding as in when a bull runs into something with its horns.
Oh, okay. That makes much more sense. And astronomers make very definite boundaries for constellations, and so Elnath is officially in Taurus.
Now we're going to look very, very high in the southern sky. Above the red planet Mars, above the moon on December 14th and 15th, you'll see a great square of 4 stars.
And that's what we call it, the Great Square of Pegasus. Ouch, this is giving me neck strain staring up so high. You should lie back in the grass to see this while we fly up for a closer look.
Like Dean said earlier, sometimes it's easier to see shapes in the stars instead of mythological creatures. Here we are zoomed in on the Great Square. For now, don't try to imagine it as a flying horse.
There's another shape coming off of the square that looks like a long stretched V, but this is not Taurus. It's actually the constellation Andromeda. So, to make it easier, let's call this an inverted A for Andromeda.
But look, there's a star that seems to connect the 2 constellations. That's Alpheratz, a blue-white star about 97 light years from Earth. But is Alpheratz in Pegasus or Andromeda? Well, Alpheratz means the navel of the mare.
But when we put the official astronomical boundaries in, we see Alpheratz is in Andromeda. Even though it completes the square of Pegasus, astronomers just decided Alpheratz should go with Andromeda.
So check out Elnath tonight in the eastern sky and find its connection between the constellations Auriga and Taurus.
And then look high overhead to find the star Alpheratz that links Andromeda and Pegasus.
I feel sorry for Andromeda. Seems like a very undignified place for a princess.
I know, it must be a great honor to have a place among the stars, but still, they couldn't find a better place for her.
The stories in the stars are weird, wacky, and wild, and you can see them all when you keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
On to today's Sea Ice Edge. You notice the changes here across the Chukchi Sea. They've been filling in over the last week or so, and now nothing less than marginal ice across central and western parts of the Chukchi, well west of Point Hope. And you can see the changes here across the Bering Strait. That is filling in fairly quickly. Not quite yet to Little Diomede, but getting there. And also new ice growing around St. Lawrence Island and outside of Kotzebue Sound and Norton Sound. So as this fills in fairly quickly, we'll probably be closing off the Bering Strait within the next week or so. So changes continue there thanks to the north winds. And don't forget, not only are sea surface temperatures primed for ice growth, but winds are settling down, which is also very important for ice to form. So all these things and cold air moving on top of that will help the ice to form fairly rapidly across the Bering Strait region and around St. Lawrence Island in the next week. Across southeast, the winds are going to lighten up a little bit after after today's fairly decent wind storm that was working through the region. That will have settled down. Northerlies across the Lynn Canal, northwesterlies through Clarence Strait, all around 15 to 20 knots or so, 3 to 4 foot seas on the inside, and northerlies south of Sitka, 20 to 25 knots with 13-foot seas there. A south and easterly flow across the northern Gulf is expected, 15 to 25 with 13-foot seas on Friday. For Saturday across the northern Gulf, remember we've got this front moving north and east right up against the coastline, and as we do that, storm force winds are expected across the region, looking at anywhere from 26 to 27 feet with gusts to 70 knots south of Sitka on the outer coast. Again, this is going to be a very healthy storm and a lot of wind working its way up toward Prince William Sound from the Dixon entrance. Across the inside, gusts to 50 knots coming out of the north through the Lynn Canal, 35 knots there, 30 knots on the inside of Stevens Passage and southeasterlies in Clarence Strait. Seas anywhere from 6 to 12 feet. Saturday does not look like a nice day anywhere around southeast as that weather is moving through. Southeasterlies inside of Prince William Sound on Friday, a 3-foot sea there on 15-knot winds. Otherwise, southerly winds working up toward the Kenai Peninsula, north and northeasterly winds through Cook Inlet, 25 to 30, with 6 to 9-foot seas there, the highest of which always around the Barrens, it seems like, 12-foot seas around Resurrection Bay. As we get into Saturday, again, that front working northward is going to squeeze a lot of wind right up next to the coast, so 40 to 50-knot winds are expected in the region. 25 to 26-foot seas outside of Prince William Sound, 4-foot seas on the inside, so considerably different. 20-knot winds from the north and east, and 25 to 30-knot winds coming down Cook Inlet from the north, with 6 to 10-foot seas there on Saturday. In Bristol Bay, looking at northeasterlies on Friday, 25 knots with a 6-foot sea, 10-foot seas down the coast. Northeasterly winds on either side of Kodiak Island up to 30 knots, 35 knots as you head down towards Sand Point with a 15-foot sea on Friday. For Saturday, again, that front will squeeze a lot of wind closer to Kodiak Island, but the brunt of it will be well off to your east. Look for 40 to 45-knot winds, though, strong enough at 25 to 28-foot seas along with that. Northerlies in Chillicothe Strait with a 9-foot sea, and 7 to 11-foot seas across the north-facing coasts of the Alaska Peninsula and the Bering Sea coast there with that 30-knot wind. For Friday across the Aleutians, look for a north and westerly wind, especially for the central and western chain, 25 to 30 knots in all areas. Should expect about 9 to 11-foot seas, 16-foot seas though west of Adak out toward Kiska, and 19-foot seas south of Atka to Nikolsky. A northeasterly flow a little bit stronger here, still holding on around Unalaska to Nikolsky and north of Dutch Harbor. For Saturday, a north and westerly wind for most areas there. You're still going to see 20 to 30 knots in most of the Pacific coastline. 15 to 30, though, as you head into the central parts of the coast, and north and northeasterly winds from Adak to Kiska with a 9-foot sea out in the west. Highest seas still holding on to about 14 to 18-foot seas from Nikolsky to Unalaska on Saturday. For the west coast, remember, northerlies are going to rule the roost. Northeasterlies blowing off the continent here could ramp up to about 20 to 25. Looking for 6 to maybe 8-foot seas around St. Matthew to St. Paul, 7 to 8-foot seas in some cases there. Ice filling into Norton Sound, and northerlies diminishing across the region. Remember how we said that wind's going to get better? It is 5 knots across Norton Sound and 20 knots south of St. Lawrence Island to Nunivak Island, with 15 knots around St. Paul and St. George with a 7-foot sea there. For the north, you're looking at 10 to 15-knot winds across the Beaufort and 15 to 25 across the Chukchi, with open waters looking at 6 to 7-foot seas. That should diminish to 4 to 5-foot seas on Saturday. North winds continue for the Chukchi, and light and somewhat variable winds continue for the Beaufort. A quick recap of your weather tonight. Snow will continue across some of the higher terrain and parts of south central. The weather should be improving for southeast with a new storm moving into the Gulf as we get into the weekend. Winds will come up for the Alaska Peninsula and even more so on Saturday. Snow's back in the region for south central heading through the weekend.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.